Well, I know you and Dolan were talking about the subject of USO, and I know you guys brought up the underwater NRO.
Yeah.
But you didn't dive too much into it, so that's something
didn't.
I'd love to talk about because it's so intriguing.
Yeah,
and
it
also
really
involves two really interesting crash retrieval stories.
So how come I've never heard of the underwater? Is it classified or is it?
Oh yeah.
So it's not. There's no website for the underwater NRO.
No,
because you would think they could make an excuse for it. They could say, "Oh yeah, we're just trying to monitor nuclear submarines, adversary submarines."
So there is a Wikipedia page that's crap that calls it the hidden younger brother of the NRO. So in U.S. intelligence, you have the big five agencies: the CIA, NSA, DIA, NRO, and NGA. And then there's the hidden NURO, the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, whose activities are seemingly more sensitive than even the NRO's. There are admirals in the Navy that I have spoken to who did not know that NURO was a thing.
Really?
And so I sent them a little bit of stuff on NURO, and they went, "Oh." So there's a couple books, such as the Intelligence Community by Jeffrey T. Richelson. Great book. I really recommend everybody read that. And some other sources that can really dive in to learn a bit more about NURO, as well as former Admiral, Director of Naval Intelligence, CIA Deputy Director, NSA Director, Bobby Ray Inman. Bobby Ray Inman, I think it was 2018, finally admitted in a speech at some university in 2018 that he directed NURO, but he still couldn't talk about it to this day, which is interesting. He said when he became Director of Naval Intelligence, he wore another hat that was NURO, but they still didn't want him to talk about it. And in another interview for a university, I think this was some California university, he said that he had gotten in trouble before for talking about NURO. So NURO was started in 1969, and it was started to kind of coordinate the Navy's and the CIA's reconnaissance activities, similar to how the NRO was started to coordinate the Air Force's and the CIA's activities, right? And so part of the founding programs for NURO were to kind of coordinate operations, keep track of, and commence missions with some of our sensitive nuclear submarines, kind of tap undersea cables. I think this was called the Ivy Bells program, and as well as just underwater reconnaissance, underwater monitoring. The NURO was supposed to exist between the Navy and CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology. Now, that Directorate of Science and Technology, we can talk a lot more about that because it has some tremendous connections to UFO crash retrievals. But really early on, the CIA just kind of took command of NURO, and it wasn't until 1972, 3 years after its creation, that John Warner, Secretary of the Navy, was finally put as NURO's director. But then it changed hands back a little bit because in 1974, Bobby Ray Inman became director of NURO, and of course, he went on to be a CIA spook. So NURO's kind of claim to fame is using vessels like the USS Halibut, USS Seawolf, the USS Jimmy Carter, the NR-1, the United States' smallest nuclear submarine, and the Glomar Explorer. Have you heard of the Glomar Explorer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so K-129 Soviet sub crashes near Hawaii, a little bit northwest. The CIA and NURO create the Glomar Explorer to go retrieve the vessel, and I think it embarks in 1972, right? And conventional wisdom, only a third of the K-129 is retrieved. Maybe more, probably more, and it might be buried up in the Pacific Northwest. But then the Glomar went on to be used by Lockheed Martin and its subsidiaries for 20 years for quote unquote deep sea mining operations and such. So the really, really, really interesting kind of connections with NURO come with Chief Scientist of Special Projects for the Navy, John P. Craven. And so in 1964, John P. Craven was set to start the Deep Submergent Systems Project, the DSSP. And I'm sorry, there's a ton of acronyms. I'll try to spell them all out. That's something I get flack for a lot. And this was to drastically increase the Navy's deep ocean engineering capabilities. And so the DSSP gave Craven the task. We need you to be able to commence engineering and Navy operations at way bigger depths. So 1964, Craven starts the DSSP. In 1965, Craven receives a classified briefing of something called Project Sand Dollar. Sand Dollar is the earliest probably SAP within SAP within SAP we can kind of make sense of. It was a program that was hidden within a program, hidden within another program, hidden within the Polaris submarine missile program, which was oddly enough spearheaded by Admiral Rayborn, who went on to go work at SAIC, but we can talk about that later. But this program was highly classified and an itemized inventory of a collection of objects on the seafloor for national security importance, ranging from the Atlantic, just all around the world. And it wasn't just aircraft or nuclear stuff. So commencing after that briefing in 1965 on Sand Dollar, Craven, under the DSSP, the Deep System Submergence Projects, creates the DSRV, Deep Submergence Rescue Vehicle, and DSSV, Deep Submergence Search Vehicle. And these are supposed to be vehicles that kind of can satisfy the DSSP. So the DSRV, the Deep Submergence Rescue Vehicle, is supposed to be basically a submarine rescue vehicle. This was out of response to the loss of the USS Thresher. And this would be something that a submarine team can get in a small little submarine that can be transported anywhere around the world in 72 hours.
Wow.
It's that rapid reaction. It can be piggybacked on a vessel. Specifically, Craven says in the Silent War, his memoirs, the USS Halibut and the USS Seawolf, 2 NURO vessels that he directly names to rescue any submarine crew anywhere in the world, la-di-la-di-da. And the DSSV, which is used for ocean surveying, ocean engineering, retrieval operations, and so forth. There were supposed to be 6 DSRV and 6 DSSV, the 2 submersible units built, but only 2 DSRVs were ever built, the Mystic and Avalon out of Lockheed Martin. So there were only 2 of those ever built. However, that brings me to a really interesting crash retrieval story. So the Art Bell show, right?
Yes.
So in 2002, I think it was about summer of 2002, a caller came on air and said, "Hello, my name is Mark. I was a former Marine diver that went on to go work on a DSRV crew." And so this guy tells the story of in 1991 or 1992, I'm getting the dates a little bit wrong, there was a survey ship in the North Atlantic, about 250 miles outside of Aberdeen, Scotland, that picked up radiological signatures on the seafloor, and that the DSRV was dispatched to go check this thing out. And so the group is steamed out to the North Atlantic. I think this is in the Rockall Trough in the North Atlantic, just northwest of Aberdeen, Scotland, because I looked at like depths, and this guy said this was about 1.5 miles deep. Mark did. And so the team dives.
So where specifically would it be again?
The Rockall Trough.
The Rockall Trough.
Yes, Rockall.
Pull up a map of that if you can, Steve.
So the team dives in the DSRV, which could also be a DSSV, a Deep System Search Vehicle, one of the two, because Craven said that, John P. Craven, remember, Chief Scientist of Special Projects out of the Navy, that although there were never official missions for DSRV or DSSV because no submarines ever sunk after the Thresher, these were sent on numerous clandestine operations.
Wow.
If it might be a Google Earth search might be a little bit better.
Well, you had it, but then you lost it. There you go. Rockall.
Yeah.
Hit layers on the bottom left. Zoom in on that. Oh shit! Look at that.
Yeah. So this was about 1.5 miles deep. So we need over 8,000 feet sea floor.
Wow.
And so Mark and his group are steamed out from Virginia. My guess is this is a really clandestine DSSV, because the DSSV have operational depths of 20,000 feet, but were apparently never built, but used according to Craven for clandestine purposes to this region. The team dives. By the time they get to the seafloor, they see a large triangle wedged in the seafloor. The triangle has no cockpit, no visible means of propulsion. It's wedged in the seafloor, and around its circumference has glyphic writing. Same thing as the 1965 Kecksburg, Pennsylvania crash. Same thing as the Roswell I-beam. Same thing as what Danny Sheehan has said he found in the classified Blue Book files. And so there's a really anomalous triangle down here, that there's no visible means of propulsion, nothing they can see. So the team goes back up, informs the steamship what they saw. A marine archaeologist is brought down. They go take photos, videos, and survey the vessel. The marine archaeologist estimates that that triangle had been buried within the kind of the seafloor for 30 or 40 years. And so eventually the team is tasked with rigging materials to the craft to try to bring it up. And because the size is about 70 feet in height, the team estimates this is about the weight of an F-14, right? And an F-14 is interesting because the NR-1 had previously recovered a lost F-14 off a U.S. aircraft carrier. But so the object is rigged up. the crew makes estimates based off the size, what metal might be, involved, brushed aluminum and so forth. But this object rises about 3 or 4 times faster once buoyancy is attached to it and it's kind of brought up to the ocean surface. The craft is eventually rigged up. Mark, once the DSRV crew is back on board, gets to see the craft again, this time in person, about 70 feet long, a little bit rounded of a back, like a perfect triangle, glyphic writing along the side, like gunmetal color, no visible means of propulsion, no lights. And eventually he and his crew are steamed off ship, never given another word about this. Not told to sign any NDAs or anything, which is kind of interesting, but apparently the work they did was inherently classified because the DSRV and the DSSV was used for classified operations under NURO.
That's fucking wild, bro.
It's a really interesting story. And it just went on Art Bell once. And I'm trying to track this down because Mark drew sketches of this for Art Bell. And he also provided Art Bell the names of the other Navy guys he was with. So I want to track these guys down and find out more about this story.
Have you tried reaching out?
Yeah, I know a guy who used to work for Art Bell, and I'm trying. No luck because Art Bell has passed. But gosh, would that be something to get after?